Thank you all for joining in for this Gita Essence series. Is my slide deck visible? Okay. So just want to see if it is all working out.
I can see the overview from Bhagavad-Gita poster.
Okay, great. Great. This is working fine. So thank you everyone for joining in for this another series of program based on the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita. Here, through the series titled as Gita Essence, we will be covering or discussing about life lessons from Bhagavad-Gita that are essential for our life, some practical subject matter, or how Bhagavad-Gita is relevant even today. Along with that, we'll be also covering the overview of the chapter, so that through this 18 sessions that we have planned for all of you, we get some important lessons for us to think about, to apply in our life, as well as we get to learn the whole of Bhagavad-Gita. So that's the objective about it. And this whole course is based on the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who is the founder of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So before I begin, I'll offer a prayer. Those of you who know this prayer can recite along with me, or else please fold your hands, close your eyes, just listen to the prayer, or else take a 3 deep breath. Om Ajnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Vashyatai Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gau Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. There is a background sound coming. I believe somebody is unmuted. Can you disable sound on the Zoom for everyone? Hare Krishna. So to begin with, we are going to talk about Bhagavad Gita. We're going to speak from Bhagavad Gita. So it's very important, first of all, to understand what is this Bhagavad Gita all about. In gist, or in essence, Bhagavad Gita is a classic conversation that happened between Lord Shri Krishna and Arjuna around 5,000 years ago at the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Pandavas, the army of Pandavas, as well as the army of Duryodhan, had both assembled to engage in a fratricidal war. It is also said that the war was not only between Pandavas and Kauravas, but also this war was between the divine and demonic forces, where divine forces were represented by Yudhishthira Maharaj, whereas the demonic forces were represented by Duryodhan or the Kauravas. Metaphorically, if we look back within our own lives, although the war happened 5,000 years ago, but even today, even at the present, this war continues on in the life of every individual. Within each individual, there are divine and demoniac forces. Not forces precisely, you can call it the voice, wherein we all must have experienced for when it comes to a decision making, or when it comes to making a choice, there are always multiple sound, if not at least two voices within our mind. One says, do it, other says, don't do it. So through this kind of a online program, we'll be having some polls for all of us to take part. So there is some interaction, so we get to know what's going on. So can I request our host or our admin here to go ahead with the first poll? And the same set of questions can be posted on the YouTube. So our guests on YouTube can also take part. And the very first question here is, have you experienced, this kind of a situation where you hear a multiple sound, one which you can very easily call it as a divine, which gives you the right advice, another as the demoniac, which actually takes you on the wrong direction. That's the point here. So the message or the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita actually strengthens the divine within us and helps us to win over our internal struggles. A lot of time people ask, Bhagavad-Gita, which was spoken 5,000 years ago, what's its value today? We'll learn as we progress through our today's discussion, as well as in the upcoming sessions. Bhagavad-Gita is extremely important even today and for all the time to come. It's a book, it's a wisdom book, which actually changes our worldviews, perceptions, and understanding of life. To begin with, as I said, the war is going on even today within the heart of every living entity. There is a divine and demoniac, and the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita can help us strengthen the divine voice within it. So what's the stats? Because I'm not on the Zoom now. So what's the poll result?
Prabhuji, I'm not able to see the poll.
You're not able to see the poll. Actually, I'm not able to sign in the Zoom, so I don't know what's going on the Zoom. Okay, so 95% people agree. We have to come a little bit here. There's too much this thing. So I believe I've been told by the admin here that 95% people agree there is this kind of a divine and demonic voice within them. Thus, the message of Bhagavad-Gita becomes critically important for the well-being of all human beings. We all, once in a while, maybe sometimes, or maybe on a day-to-day basis, face challenges with keeping commitments, making decisions, acting righteously at time. Yes or no? Let's take out another poll, second poll, where the question asked is, do you face challenge in keeping up with your commitment? Or do you find it difficult to act according to dharma, according to the principles? Is it easy or is it difficult? Therefore, the message of Bhagavad-Gita becomes very important because it gives us the strength and the wisdom to follow the path of dharma. It is also important to note that this message of Bhagavad-Gita is not a sectarian message, which unfortunately many people tag it, call it as a religious book. Whenever we call any literature as a religious book, it by default becomes a sectarian. What is sectarian knowledge? Which refers to a set of people having a faith in something which is not universal, but that's not the message of Bhagavad-Gita. In fact, when Krishna spoke to Arjuna, he spoke not to Arjuna, through Arjuna to all living entities, and we'll see through the course of discussion in Bhagavad-Gita. Actually, the time when Lord Shri Krishna spoke this message of Bhagavad-Gita, there were no religions that exist today. There was nothing called as Hinduism. There was nothing called as Islam, Christianity. If you know the history of world religions, we although discussed all this subject matter in one of our previous series recently, there are hardly 2,000 to 3,000-year-old religions that we have. And the message of Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago. So when Krishna was speaking to Arjuna, actually this message was spoken for all the humanity at that time and for all the humanity to come at this point of time. So what's the poll result? 90%. So people agree that they find it difficult to keep up with their commitments or follow dharma. And at that point of time, if it was not modern day religions, the question arises, what kind of religion was practiced that time? There was only Vanashram Dharma. So we have to make sure the Zoom, everyone is disabled. Don't disable the sound here. Otherwise, our rest of the audience will be disturbed. So can we request everyone on the Zoom to keep on mute? Okay, yeah. Hare Krishna. At that point of time, Krishna explains Dharma. What is Vanashram Dharma, which will also be discussed in Bhagavad-Gita as we proceed ahead? A scientific division of the society based on one's psychological and biological activities and not according to one's birth. And the person would choose an occupation according to his psychological interest or according to his needs. And therefore, the Vanashram Dharma was divided into Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And when a teacher or the guru would identify the need of an individual student, and accordingly training was given, therefore, every individual, at least in those days, if somebody was a Kshatriya, acted as a Kshatriya. They did not become a Kshatriya because they had to maintain their household affairs. If somebody was a Vaishya, then he acted as a Vaishya, which means he had his business. He did a cow protection. He took care of the cow. He did not become a businessman because somehow he had to maintain his household affair. Unfortunately, today, because the system has been completely destroyed or forgotten or misrepresented, everyone today takes to an occupation wherein there is money. We choose a field of study wherein there will be money. We choose the profession where there will be money. And after we get to that profession, then a person wonders, did I make the right choice? Should I make a switch in my profession? So here's a third point for all of you, just to let you know that, to connect with all of us here. How many of you have pondered or have you thought about, am I in the right profession? Am I in the right field? Or have been thinking of switching your profession or job constantly. In essence, Bhagavad-Gita is the best self-help book, and it's an adventurous journey in itself, which we'll actually certainly experience as we proceed ahead with our discussion. And when we understand this message of Bhagavad-Gita, it will definitely bring about a great change of heart and fill our life with auspiciousness. With that little introduction to Bhagavad-Gita, I welcome you all once again to this series based on the message of Bhagavad-Gita. To begin with, the very first topic for today, what's the poll result that we just conducted?
Yes.
Hare Krishna.
76%.
So 76% people are thinking, why am I into this profession? Okay, that's still more than 50%. According to the law of democracy, people are unhappy, dissatisfied. Okay, let's begin with the first topic for today, crisis management. So like this, there will be 18 topics based on the 18 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita. Let's a little bit reflect on the subject matter of crisis. Crisis is a part of everyone's life. 5,000 years ago, Arjuna faced the biggest crisis of his life when he entered the battlefield. The battlefield of Kurukshetra, which was the most anticipated moment of Arjuna's life, for which he had prepared for 12 long years. In fact, not 12 long years of his exile, but also literally all his life for that moment. Kshatriya, to establish Dharma, has to fight. And this is the biggest battle of the life of Arjuna. And for Kshatriya, just like for a cricketer, he loves playing. I hope so. They're not doing it for the sake of money. I hope they love playing cricket. So just like they want to go and play cricket day in and day out, similarly for Kshatriya, it's actually an honor for them to go and fight. It's a sports for them. They're not scared of giving up their life. Neither they're scared taking life. So Arjuna, being a Kshatriya, his most joyful moment, the moment that he cherished and prepared all his life, has come. And suddenly when he entered the battlefield, he went through an incredible crisis. Of course, there was a crisis that was about to begin right on the battlefield. When the war would begin, then there would be a lot of hue and cry and death. So suddenly there is a crisis which is about to begin. But before that crisis, Arjuna went through internal crisis, wherein he became totally confused. What am I doing? Why am I doing? Have I made the right decision to come to this battlefield? And like this, he began to question about his decision and about his purpose of life. And that's how the Bhagavad Gita begins where Arjuna is faced with a very, very serious crisis. And this crisis of Arjuna can actually change the future discourse of the entire world. If Arjuna would have to walk away from the battlefield, then the situation would have been different, entirely different. Probably you and I today would not have had the Bhagavad-Gita to read or study. But because Arjuna, that we'll be discussing in the second chapter, decided to take guidance from Lord Shri Krishna, he accepted a teacher or a mentor or a guide. Therefore, the discourse of the Battle of Kurukshetra changed. Ultimately, what began with a crisis for Arjuna at the end of Bhagavad Gita led to a resolution where Arjuna became again firm and fixed in the purpose of his life and his decision. And that is how the Bhagavad Gita begins. The chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita is titled as Observing the Armies, or is also called as Arjun Vishad Yoga. Now, let's a little bit look at the title of the chapter. The title of the chapter is given, which reflects the main theme of the chapter. So here, the title of chapter 1 is Observing the Armies, seeing the armies, which means to see through our vision. But that's not correct. These eyes are just an instrument. We don't actually see from our eyes. We see from our perceptions. Perceptions, yes, perceptions. Let me give you an example. A religious fanatic, when he sees another person from another religion, he sees that person as his enemy. He may call him as a kafir, he may call him as a Satan and whatnot. However, when this religious fanatic sees a person from his community who believes in his religion, he calls him a brother. My question to you is, ultimately, they both are human beings. Now, this other person who belonged to another religious community have not done anything to him, but why he has such a hatred for that person? He sees, but not only sees from the eyes, he sees from his perceptions or the worldviews. So our perceptions or the worldviews creates a reality of our life. And that is what the chapter talks about, that Arjuna's bewilderment or crisis was because of his misconstrued or misidentified, or what should I say, corrupt perceptions or the corrupt worldview. And that is what is the main theme of this particular chapter that we'll be discussing. And the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, the dialogue of Lord Shri Krishna, the instructions of Lord Shri Krishna to Arjuna is all about fixing the perception, is all about fixing the worldview of Arjuna. So he sees as it is. He sees actually what is the reality. Therefore, Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is, so that we cultivate the right perceptions or the right worldviews and understand how this world functions. Who am I? What is the purpose of my life? And what decision am I supposed to make in different situations that come upon in my life? And this whole wisdom of Bhagavad Gita is divided into 5 key subject matters, which is called as the Gita matrix: Ishvara, Kala, Jiva, Prakriti, and Karma. So prior to the series, we had also had a series which we just concluded 10 days before, that was titled as Dealing with COVID Crisis, Insights from Bhagavad Gita, wherein we had elaborately discussed on these 5 key subject matters. Can I just briefly know how many of you who are attending the session today were part of that previous series, Dealing with COVID Crisis, or what we call as Insights from Bhagavad Gita? I don't know how, can they respond some way? Those who are on YouTube, maybe they can just say yes. Is the chat enabled?
Yes, Prabhuji, chat is enabled.
Okay, so maybe the admin can let me know what was the status at the end of the day. So great. I got to know from the admin here that many of you are saying yes. So welcome back to the another series. Again, welcome to all the new guests also. So let's begin our chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita. Interestingly, Bhagavad Gita begins with not Krishna Vacha, not Arjuna Vacha, not Vyasa Vacha. It begins with the most profound character of whole of Mahabharata, Dhritarashtra. Very interesting name. You know, of course, not now, maybe in later on, we'll be going into the detailed study of Bhagavad-Gita. Then we'll talk about the whole naming convention and the whole history about the names. But I'll give you a little bit summary here. Dhritarashtra. You break the words and it becomes Dhrit plus Rashtra. Dhrit means determined, which means attached. I remember whenever I think of the word attached, suddenly that advertisement runs into my mind. When I was a young child, those days, Favicol advertisement used to come on the TV. And there the person will go and sit on the chair and he would not be able to get up. And then the trailer will come. Favicol ka jod, tode na tute. Something like that, you remember? You'll be stuck to the chair. So like that, actually Dhritarashtra was stuck to his throne, which means Dhrit means determined or attached, and Rashtra means to the kingship, to the throne. Dhritarashtra was so attached, he was willing to compromise anything, sacrifice everything just to fulfill his one desire to remain a king. Although he was not an appointed king, he was a temporary king who was given that kingship in the absence of Pandu and until Yudhishthira Maharaj becomes 18-year-old. But because Yudhishthira was so attached, he didn't want Yudhishthira Maharaj or Pandavas to get their rightful kingdom back. Therefore, he ensured and therefore he allowed Duryodhana and his party to continue with all their misconduct, all their activities against the Pandavas. In other words, Dhritarashtra was like a mafia don who was acting behind the scene, wherein Duryodhana was his puppet. Wherein Duryodhana was in front, as if Duryodhana is only responsible for the war, but actually no. Yes, Duryodhana is. But Dhritarashtra, being a king, had the opportunity to say no, to reject Duryodhana's whims, but Dhritarashtra never did that. And that is the meaning of this word, Dhritarashtra. So it was his obstinacy and deep-rooted material aspiration that brought the family, Pandavas and Kauravas, together at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And therefore, Dhritarashtra is asking to Sanjaya, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yusava Mamaka Bandavas Chaiva Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra says, Dharma Kshetra Kurukshetra, at the battlefield, at Kurukshetra, which is called as a religious place of Dharma. At that Kurukshetra, Samaveta Yusava, they all have assembled to fight. Mamaka, Pandavas Chaiva. Mamaka means mine, my sons and Pandavas. When they have assembled to fight at the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Kim Akurvata Sanjaya. Hey Sanjaya, what did they do? Now this question really makes no sense. Now if imagine India and Pakistan team goes to play a World Cup final, cricket match final. What do you expect them to do on the cricket field? Play cricket match or play soccer? Of course, play cricket. So what a ridiculous question he's asking, isn't it? So what is this question actually indicates here? Actually, this question also has its own meaning. Why Dhritarashtra is asking? Dhritarashtra is fearful of the influence of the Dharma Kshetra at the mind of his son Duryodhana. See, environment has its own impact on our consciousness. Let me ask this question to all of you. So based on your response, I'll explain more of this concept. When you visited, let's say, ISKCON temple, how many of you feel your consciousness becomes elevated? Yes or no? You feel a little sense of auspiciousness. There is an ongoing kirtan, very beautiful darshan of the deities. So the audience sitting here, they have said yes. I'm assuming you're also saying yes. I mean, what can I do? I can't see any one of you. So please let me know whenever I can sign in the Zoom, okay? So at least I get to see of it. Still not able to, okay, fine. Tomorrow I'll sign in 15 minutes before. So at least I can join in the Zoom. Okay, fine. What was I making a point? So the environment has a great impact on our consciousness. Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra is a religious place. Dhritarashtra was worried. I hope that Duryodhana, his mind does not get changed under the influence of the pious place of Kurukshetra. He should not get carried away of the auspiciousness of that place, and he should not become softer on Pandavas, thinking that, oh, why to fight? Let it be. Therefore, Dhritarashtra asked. And this is not the only reason, there are more reasons, but I'll just pause here. Otherwise, we'll be stuck on the first verse only. But that's the point here, where, this is a scene and why Bhagavad-Gita begins with Dhritarashtra Vacha and why Dhritarashtra asked such a strange question. So after listening to this, Sanjay began to speak. So let me just give a little bit more background. So what's happening here is, so here Vyasadeva, right before the battle of Kurukshetra began, had visited Dhritarashtra at Hastinapur to one last time to make an attempt to convince Dhritarashtra to call off the war and fulfill the Pandavas' requirements, which was give them at least 5 villages. But Dhritarashtra did not agree to that also. Vyasadeva became frustrated and he decided to walk away from Hastinapur. And when he was walking away from the palace, at the last minute, he turned around and looked at Dhritarashtra. He said, Dhritarashtra, you fool, because of you, the whole world will suffer. I want you to see that suffering from your own eyes, because you are responsible for what is about to begin. You don't know how many lives will be lost, how many wives will become widow, how many kids will become fatherless, how many mothers would not have son to live on because of you. So I want you to see that suffering. I want you to see how your army, how your son will be routed at the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Therefore, I want to give you this divine vision so that you can see. Dhritarashtra became petrified, terrified. He said, no, 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 my dear father, do not say it like this to me. I cannot. But Vyasadeva at that point of time empowered Sanjaya with that vision, saying that, Sanjaya, I want you to narrate every single thing that goes onto the battlefield of Kurukshetra to Dhritarashtra. So herein, Sanjaya is speaking to Dhritarashtra, or Dhritarashtra Sanjaya are having a conversation where Dhritarashtra asks this question, and now Sanjaya begins to explain what is happening at the battlefield. And that is how Bhagavad-Gita begins. Right after this is Sanjaya, who keeps on answering to this particular question of Dhritarashtra, what happened when they both assembled? And that is rest of the Bhagavad-Gita, wherein Sanjaya would go ahead and explain about the dialogue which happened between Arjuna and Krishna. So that's the whole background of it, and that's how it started. To make the subject matter a little easy for all of us, this is an acronym. We'll be studying the whole chapter of Bhagavad-Gita through the acronym. And this acronym were actually, I would say, were coined, if that's the correct word, by His Grace Sadapat Prabhu from Bhaktivedanta Manor, UK. Through his thorough and intensive study of Bhagavad-Gita, he came up and divided the chapters in these acronyms. And I'll be referring to those acronyms which he created or he made to make our study and discussion easy. So that's an acronym for chapter 1, titled as doubt. Let's take a look at it, what it means. Where D stands for Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, wherein Sanjaya began to speak to Dhritarashtra, and for very first he began to talk about the action of Duryodhana. And Sanjaya said to Dhritarashtra that when Duryodhana saw the huge army of Pandavas assembled at the battlefield, he literally fainted. Although he had almost 11 Akshahani Sena, where Pandavas hardly had 7 Akshahani Sena, yet Duryodhana got terrified. And Duryodhana was worried seeing this huge army. Along with that, he had his own reasons to be fearful. So through this set of verses from verse number 2 to verse number 12, Sanjaya describes the activities or the actions of Duryodhana. Primarily his diplomacy, wherein he goes and instigates his army men, his generals, inspire them to fight with Pandavas, as simultaneously it also depicts this inner fear. Question arises, why Duryodhana is fearful? First of all, does Duryodhana need to be fearful? Now let me just tell you a little bit about the army of Duryodhana. But let me put it this way. Let's take an example of a cricket match. Imagine, it's a World Cup final, and you're playing a cricket match, and the opponent have scored, let's say, 200 runs, and you have to hit 201 runs in 50 overs. Your opening batsmen have played so well that they have remained not out until 185 runs. And after that, you go to the not battlefield, I mean the cricket field. You go and play the cricket. And now you've brought your team to the brink of victory, where you're there at 200 runs. You have just 1 run to win. You have more than 25 overs remaining, and you have 8 batsmen to follow after you. Now, is there any debate about this situation of the game? Who's going to win it? Is there any doubt? Not even any fool would have a doubt who would win it. It is so clear. Precisely, that was the situation of Duryodhana's army. There was no doubt that Kauravas will be victorious. Now, how do I say so Kauravas victorious? First of all, they had 11 Akshahani Sena. Huge, huge army, literally double the size of Pandava's army. Second, what do you do if you have players in your cricket team who can never get out? Let's say you're playing a test match, and if you have 10 batsmen, and 10 batsmen are replica of Rahul Dravid, who you can never who is a sober guy who knows how to play in mode of goodness. And he doesn't get agitated, tempted by the loose balls, and he knows how to protect his wicket. And he continues on for the 5 days. And although he may not score a score, he may put his score 0, but he'll not get out also. Okay, jokes apart. The point I'm making is, what do you do when you have a fighter like Bhishma Pitama, a not out person who had been blessed that he cannot be defeated, who had been blessed cannot be killed. He has been blessed by his father that you get to choose when you want to die. Now, how do you fight and win a war against such an army? You have Dronacharya, who was also blessed that he cannot be killed by anyone. You had Kripacharya, who was blessed that he cannot be killed, he cannot be defeated. Then you had great warriors like Ashwathama, then you have Jayadratha, then you have 99 brothers of Duryodhana, then you had Shakuni, then you had Shalya. You had so many great warriors. Even if not about other great warriors, you had Karna. Even if not about all the great warriors, when you have a not out players in your team, there's no question of you getting defeated ever. So my question to all of you is, when you have such a backing, then why would a leader be still afraid? And that is what has been described, his inner fear. And the reason for his fear is very simple. Just like a thief, how much ever he may be assured that the pullers or the political parties, they're going to support me, I have everything under my control, yet there is a constant fear. Yes or no? Whoever is that person, what if the political party changes? If Congress goes, BJP comes, or vice versa, whatever it is, what will happen to me? Similarly, Duryodhana, because he had forcefully usurped the kingdom that belonged to someone else, he knew very well that what I did was wrong. Therefore, there was a constant fear in his heart. Second reason why was he fearful was he was doubtful about the loyalty of his people. He saw and he knew that people are there with him for their own selfish motivations. Shakuni had his own reason, Karna had his own reason. Karna wanted to prove that he is the best bowman by defeating Arjuna. Shakuni had his own reason because he had taken a war to destroy the whole Hastinapur race. Everyone had their own reason. And before the war only, because of the selfish motivations, already a tussle was going on between the army of Kaurava leaders, between the leaders of the Kauravas race and the Kauravas army. Therefore, Duryodhana was worried. What if those who are not out people like Bhishma Pitama, Dronacharya, halfway through the cricket match, they decide to quit and disappear? Then who will protect me? That's the reason Duryodhana was worried. And this brings out a very, very important lesson. And the lesson is, can we just increase the temperature? Yeah. And the lesson is, the very first lesson from what we learned from Duryodhana's behavior is, material security and resources does not guarantee success and fearlessness. Material security, I've already explained, He had people who could not defeat it. Resources, I've also explained that he had a far greater army than the Pandavas, yet he was fearful and there was no guarantee of success. So material success, material security, and resources does not guarantee success and fearfulness. It is often seen that people who have more possessions, have more wealth, are often more fearful than an ordinary citizen. Yes or no? Agreed? Yes, no, maybe, maybe not. Maybe you're not sure of it. Fine. But they're more fearful because in everyone or in any relationship that they have, they always wonder, what is it that this person wants from me? Because they know they have something which is very valuable and maybe people want to steal away from them. That's the reason they're in constant fear. Thus, what makes us fearless? Even if our material success, material resources, and security cannot award us fearlessness, what makes us fearlessness is a subject matter worth pondering. For the time being, all of you think about it. In the upcoming sessions, we'll talk about fearlessness. Lesson number 2 that we learn from the scenario: when the individuals become self-centered, egoistic, and is primarily interested in selfish gain and personal aggrandizement, then fear, anxiety, and disappointment are inevitable. It's a classic case of the Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. They become so arrogant, so selfish. Yudhishthira Maharaj, at the end of the day, settled that fine, if he doesn't want to return our Indraprastha back to us, if he doesn't want to return Hastinapur because we are the king, fine. Don't give us back the whole kingship. Don't give us back what we created in the press. At least give us 5 villages. And because we are Kshatriya, we are supposed to do the task of administration. Duryodhana was not willing to do so. And that is what brought about the crisis. So when a person lives a life with a self-centered and selfish perspective, then fear, anxiety, and disappointment are inevitable. Unfortunately, such an individual becomes oblivious to the ill effects of his action, which means Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra both were not able to realize, because of their self-centeredness and selfishness, more than 60 crore warriors are about to die in the next 18 days of war. Thus, after describing Duryodhana's actions, Sanjay begins to speak about what did Pandavas do. And that brings us to the second section of this chapter, where O stands for ominous results, from verse number 13 to verse number 20. Here, Sanjay describes the signs of victory of Pandavas, a Pandavas army, where Sanjay, right in the beginning of Bhagavad-Gita, declares to Dhritarashtra, no hope. The war has not begun, but right now itself, Sanjay gives the indications why and how Pandavas would be victorious. And it's not Sanjay speculating. He's sharing the facts, what he's seeing on the battlefield. When the Pandavas blew their conch, when the trumpets and the bugles at the side of the Pandavas, when the Bhima roared, it is described in Mahabharata, those who were sitting on the horses or the elephants, they fell from their seat. Those who were standing on their feet, they collapsed on the ground with their heart pumping out of fear. So much heart throbbing was happening because the roaring and the sound of the conch was so terrible. Literally, the whole of the Kauravas army fainted on the ground. And this is what Sanjay is seeing. And Sanjay is looking at it and saying, what is the use of fighting? Imagine a person goes to play a cricket match who was good at playing a gully cricket, and now in front of him the bowler is Shoaib Akhtar. Now looking at Shoaib Akhtar, this fellow begins to shake. What will he play cricket? Yes or no? I don't know if he's still the fastest bowler. Probably he's not playing cricket anymore, whatever the scene, but in those days he was the fastest bowler. Now seeing the Pandavas, not even seeing the Pandavas, hearing the sound of the Pandavas called, they got so terrified. So Sanjay talks about it and says, to the Dhritarashtra, there is no hope for you to win this war. And the main reason why Sanjay says that Pandavas will be victorious was Krishna factor. Krishna's presence by the side of Pandavas. Through this series of verses between verse number 13 to verse number 20, a key message that gets highlighted is that Lord's protection is guaranteed to his surrendered devotees. Regardless of whether the worldly odds seem stacked against the devotee, yet the devotee would be protected whenever the devotees stand by the side of Dharma. Therefore, Sanjay explains, Pandavas were chilling out at the battlefield. They were totally fearless. And this brings out an important lesson. Just like the fear of Duryodhana brought about a lesson for us, similarly, the fearlessness of Pandavas teaches us a lesson. And what is that? It is our faith in Lord Shri Krishna that determines our degree of fearlessness. To give an example, Krishna had announced before the beginning of the battlefield or beginning of the battle that he will not take side. He will not take side. He will not fight in the war. He will not pick up a weapon. So both Arjuna and Duryodhana, you all are aware of the story, reached Dwarka, the palace of Krishna, at the same moment. And when they entered the chamber of Krishna, Krishna was taking rest. Arjuna stood by the feet, whereas Duryodhana went and stood by the head of Krishna. Krishna got up and Krishna saw Arjuna, and then he saw Duryodhana. And Krishna said, yes, what can I do for you? It was obviously they both have come to ask help for Krishna, because that is what is diplomacy. That is what everyone would do preparing for the war. So Krishna asked Arjuna first, and Duryodhana became agitated. Duryodhana said, Krishna, how can you ask Arjuna first? I entered your chamber first, so therefore I have the right. And Krishna said, Duryodhana, Arjuna is your younger brother. So the younger brother has a right to ask first. And second thing, because I saw Arjuna first, that matters more. You know what you say. Because I saw Arjuna first, therefore I would award Arjuna the blessing to ask anything that he wants. So before Arjuna could ask, understanding the situation at hand, Krishna said, so let me make this announcement to both of you. I know why you have come, but I have made my decision that I will not pick a weapon in the war. So here is two options for you to choose. Either you can choose me, bare hands, without any weapon. I will not engage in war. Or else you can choose my Narayani Sena, which is so powerful that that Narayani Sena is enough to win the war for whoever gets Narayani Sena. Now Duryodhana began to sweat. Duryodhana was terrified. Oh no. For sure Arjuna is going to ask for Narayani Sena. What will he do with this guy? What will he do with this fellow without a weapon? What is his value at the battlefield? Would he come and crack a joke or inspire or something? I don't need an entertainer. I need somebody who can be practical at the battlefield. So I don't need. So Duryodhana began to sweat. What's going to happen? No, Arjuna will ask for Narayani Sena. As soon as Lord Shri Krishna stopped saying, and he said, Arjuna, your choice. Without even blinking his eyes, Arjuna said, my dear Krishna, I only need you. Immediately the sweat disappeared. The one who was petrified, the one who was fear-stricken, suddenly his face had a blissful smile. And then realizing the situation, he became sober, just to keep his happiness within himself. And then with a very sober voice, heavy voice, he said, my dear Krishna, what can I do? If my younger brother have made a decision to have you, no problem. I will keep Narayani Sena, whatever is left for me. Thank you so much. And he walked away because he had nothing to give and take with Krishna. And when he walked away, Krishna looked at Arjuna and said, Arjuna, what did you do? Why did you make such a big blunder? And Arjuna said, my dear Lord, how can you say this is a blunder? Do you think, for me to win a war, or for us to win a war, we need your Narayani Sena? No, we don't need your resources. We don't need your possession. We don't need your powers. What we need is you. My dear Lord, my dear Krishna, wherever you are, for sure, there will be victory. And for me, there is nothing as important as your association. If you're there by my side at the battlefield, I alone can defeat all the Kauravas. And that was the faith of Arjuna. Think about it in our own personal lives. Therefore, Pandavas were fearless. So, fearlessness depends on the degree of our faith or surrender to Krishna. It's not easy. But the subject matter of Bhagavad-Gita, as we build up, will make this faith more stronger. So, hang on. Let's go to the next section, where the next section, after describing the actions of Pandavas, we come to the third section, U for uncertainty, from verse number 21 to 27. Where here Sanjay speaks about that how Arjuna, out of curiosity, asked Krishna, who was actually the charioteer of Arjuna, to drive his chariot at the middle of the battlefield because he wanted to see who have assembled at the side of Kauravas. And the key theme of this set of verses is Lord is an intimate servant of his devotee. Very interesting. Vishnu Puran describes the quality of Krishna as Aishwarasya Samagrasya Virayasya Yashashashriya Jnana Vairagyayachaiva Sannabhaga Itangana. It describes Krishna to be the most opulent, most powerful, the most beautiful, most knowledgeable, most renounced, the most famous, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has been introduced in the most important text in the history of mankind, known as Bhagavad-Gita, as what? As a charioteer. As a charioteer of Arjuna. And that brings out a very, very important message through this set of verses. First, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is willing to accept a menial position if that pleases his devotees. Generally, we understand or we think it is only we need to serve the Lord, but actually it's a mutual relationship. When you love and when the other person loves you, the definition of love means to serve. If you love somebody, you want to serve that person. And when similarly Lord loves, similarly Lord wants to serve. And Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, because you love me, or in other words, Krishna says, Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskaru. There are many other verses where Krishna describes pratijani, or what is that? Nami bhakta pranashyati, where Krishna speaks about that my devotees are never perish and never destroyed. In other words, what I'm trying to make a point here is Krishna reciprocates to the love of a devotee. When he sees somebody loves him, Krishna equally, or in fact, hundreds and thousands and millions of times more reciprocates to that love of that individual. Similarly, because Arjuna had put faith on Krishna, had chosen Krishna over Narayani Sena, when Arjuna requested, my dear Lord, would you become a charioteer? Krishna agreed. A lot more can be spoken. Krishna, which Brahma describes, Lakshmi Sahasra Shata Sambrahma Sevya Manam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Everyone is running after money. Money is under the care of Mother Lakshmi. And millions of such Lakshmi are worshipping the lotus feet of Krishna, Govinda. And that Govinda or Krishna has become or taken this menial service of driving the chariot of Arjuna. He is not an autocratic ruler or an order supplier whose only job is to punish sinners or law violators. That's a very limited understanding, primarily coming from a Western theology. Very limited understanding. That is not the complete understanding. Very, very narrow understanding. And the third, rather, the Lord engages in various loving exchanges with his dear devotees, and he descends in this material world to attract our hearts through his loving pastimes. So the lesson this series of verses teaches us is, despite the intensity of the situation, Arjuna took the time to reflect. Therefore, he asked Krishna, my dear Lord, please drive my chariot in the middle of the battlefield. I want to see. He took the time to reflect, which means life may be crammed with responsibilities and pressing issues, but attendance to such demands, which means your professional responsibilities and other engagements, should not be at the expense of quality spiritual introspection. Unfortunately, the chronic disease of modern man is the excuse of no time when it comes to such soul searching. It's a one answer that we hear the most when we encourage people to think or to spend some time for their spiritual life. And a one standard answer that generally we get to hear is, Prabhu ji, मरने का समय नहीं है. आप spiritual life पे time देने की बात कर रहे हैं. So people say they don't even have time to die. But look, Arjuna is on the battlefield where he could be killed any moment, yet he's taking a time to reflect about it. And that's the point here. After this, we come to the fourth section, where B stands for bewilderment, verse number 28 to 30. Arjuna, foreseeing the imminent suffering and the death of his relatives, friends, and hundreds and millions of soldiers who have assembled at the battlefield as a consequence of war, he began to reflect on his decision to engage in the war. And therefore, he became bewildered or confused about what he should do. Here, the key theme in these three verses is that illusion causes all problems in life arising due to bodily identification. I'll explain the subject matter more in tomorrow's session. Bodily identification arising because of I and mine. In other words, me and mine. At this point of time, Arjuna, being bereft of a broader spiritual vision, being affected by a narrow material understanding of life, has got bewildered about his responsibility. Therefore, he's confused what he should do. What is the question of being confused now? Again, taking an example of a cricket match. A batsman who have been preparing, you get selected for Indian cricket team to play on the World Cup, which means you must have gone years of training. And suddenly when you go to play and there he has to face Shoaib Akhtar, you're not expected to run away from the cricket ground saying that, no, I don't want to play. He's too fast a bowler or what. No, you prepared yourself and you have been acknowledged with the best batsman. So what's the big deal if it's a Shane Warne, Shoaib Akhtar, is a spin or the fast ball? So why Arjuna is bewildered at this point of time doesn't make sense. He had prepared for it. Otherwise, why did he go to Gurukul and why did he learn the skill set of shooting arrow? Why did he go to Indra's place and acquire all the celestial weapons? So this set of verses brings about an important lesson. When one lacks an understanding of his spiritual identity, his relationship with the Supreme Lord, and the critical purpose behind this world, and the critical purpose or the purpose of his own life, one inevitably becomes disturbed and frustrated by life's challenges. Not knowing this subject matter is what drags the consciousness of an individual. That is what fills the heart of an individual with pessimism and hopelessness. But one who understands the message of Bhagavad-Gita can never be hopeless. Arjuna, who was hopeless, became hopeful. Who was insecure, became fearless. And that is the strength of the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita, which establishes our spiritual identity, establishes our relationship with the Supreme Lord, and teaches us about the purpose of our existence, the purpose of this world. For that, I will request all of you to hang on as we proceed ahead in upcoming sessions. We'll be discussing about this subject matter. Looking at the watch, I realize we've kind of run out of time. If I just can request all of you for just 5 minutes, we're about to conclude now. Hare Krishna. Do I have a permission of all of you? Take maybe 5 to 7 minutes to conclude today's discussion. We're on the final section of chapter 1. Yes or no? Or somebody is really disappointed or becoming hopeless. So you should definitely stay on so you can get over your hopelessness. Coming to the last section of this chapter, doubt with a T, turning point. From verse number 31 to 42, wherein Arjuna now begins to speak about different reasons for not engaging in the war. And at the end of chapter 1, Arjuna says, Krishna, I give up my Gandiva bow. With eyes filled with tears, sat down on the chariot and he told Krishna, my dear Lord, I cannot fight. So this section talks about the set of reasons that Arjuna gave. And they are very interesting reasons. We'll quickly look at it. We'll not go in detail in this series of discussion. The very first argument that he gave was compassion. So what you see ahead of compassion 1.27-28, one refers to chapter, and after dot refers to verse number, for those of you who would like to refer later on. Arjuna said, it would be cruel and heartless to prematurely terminate the lives of so many soldiers for the sake of our interest. Therefore, out of compassion for everyone, I quit. Second, enjoyment. Arjuna said, what is the use of fighting in the war and winning an unrivaled kingdom? Because people with whom you can enjoy and share happiness, if they would not be living, if all my brothers, relatives, friends, and everyone would die in the battlefield, with whom would I share my happiness? Therefore, I quit. Third reason, fear of sins. I would have to fight with my teacher Dronacharya, Kripacharya, with my great-grandfather Bhishma Pitama, who raised me as his own son. If I kill my own seniors, I would incur great sinful reactions. So what is the use of fighting a war when I know I'm going to incur sin? Thus, I quit. Fourth, destruction of family tradition. It is Kshatriya, a dharmic Kshatriya, who protects family traditions by ensuring Vanashram Dharma is being protected and established. But now, because all the Kshatriyas have assembled from all over the world on this battlefield of Kurukshetra, there would be a massive massacre because of the death of hundreds and thousands of millions of Kshatriyas. There would not be any protectors in the respective kingdoms. Because there would not be any protectors, the rogues and the thieves would become the leaders of the society, and that would lead to the destruction of the social structure and the family culture and family traditions. I don't want to become responsible for destroying the lives of the future generation by not ensuring that they get the right culture and the right parentage. I don't want to deprive the future generation from the support of their father or the love of the father. And like that, he gave reason and he said, therefore, I quit. And the fifth reason that Arjuna gave, that comes in second chapter, is indecision, where Arjuna says, my dear Lord, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm totally confused. Wherein he keeps switching his mind, I should do it, I should not do it. And that's how the chapter 1 ends. And this concluding section brings out a very important lesson. The cause of Arjuna's bewilderment was his own self-interest. He was thinking too much from his own perspective. Or again, as I said, observing the army meant seeing from his own perception or from our own worldviews. Wherein Arjuna forgot, if he does not fight, an adharmic king Duryodhan will become the leader of the society. Undoubtedly, adharma will flourish, which Arjuna is not able to understand at this point of time. He's worried about his own happiness. With whom would I enjoy if I don't have friends and family members? He's worried about his own sinful reactions, which is actually not true, because it is not Pandavas who have invited Kauravas. Pandavas were forced into the war. So there cannot be any question of sin for a Kshatriya. Just like a government sent a soldier on a border to fight and defend a nation, and when that soldier kills the enemy, does he get awarded? Does he get punished? He gets awarded because he is doing so to protect his kingdom, to protect the dharma or the kingdom of the kingdom or the lives of the people of that country. So he's awarded. And similarly, Arjuna and Pandavas had assembled to protect dharma, so there could not be any question of sin. So the cause of his bewilderment was his own self-interest and limited perception of worldviews. And the effect was a fear, loss of composure, and indecision. So therefore, is a question for all of you, which means another poll. Do you struggle with decision making? How many of us struggle with decision making in our life? Yes, no, yes, no. Thank you. I intend to ask this on the Zoom. I hope you're sharing the question on the Zoom also, and also on the YouTube. Yes, no, maybe, maybe not. What's your point? See, I'm not saying decision making about should I drink a milk tonight or not. All right. Life is not only about eating. Should I sleep at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock? No, I'm not asking that. It's a very critical junction for Arjuna. I'm particularly asking when certain decisions which are very important for you. How many of us find it too difficult to make a decision? What's the answer? Our audience saying?
Yes, sometimes. It happens with yes.
It's difficult. And the reason is, as is given in the case of Arjuna, primarily it is our self-interest and limited understanding of the world which prohibits or limits our ability to make the right decision. To conclude our today's talk, life means ups and downs. And we all face various challenges in our life. With some we can deal easily, while others have the potential to overwhelm us. Just like Arjuna was overwhelmed with the situation faced by him. And at that situation, he decided what was best for him. And what he thought was best for him was to quit. Similarly, many times in our life, when we are faced with challenging situations, we also make a decision to quit. Yes or no? How many of you have felt enough is enough? I would just want to walk away from it. Otherwise, why would there would be an increase of divorces? Why would be there a case of suicide? This is what it means. People want to quit. So point is, often it is seen that when an individual is faced with an overwhelming situation, a common response is to quit. It means that although our situation could be different than other situation that Arjuna was faced with 5,000 years ago, but the response is still the same, which means the situation could be different, but the response is same. Therefore, the message of Bhagavad-Gita has the potential to empower us to make the right decision, because that's what it did with Arjuna. At the end of Bhagavad-Gita, the situation for Arjuna did not change. His relatives and dear ones were still standing in front of us. It's not that after listening to Bhagavad-Gita, they disappeared from the battlefield. However, his response changed. He became free from bewilderment and grief and eventually won the battle. Similarly, the Bhagavad-Gita or the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita can change our response to an overwhelming situation and help us win the battle of life. But be assured that you may not be faced with a challenging situation or the overwhelming situation today, but such an overwhelming situation can happen to us at any point of time, which means we can meet with such existential crisis where we become totally doubtful about what am I supposed to do at any time. And today, the situation in the world is not that favorable. People are undergoing severe crisis because of the pandemic or the COVID. So yes, people are facing challenges. How we deal with the crisis determines where we end up, which means what our future would be. And third, how we conduct ourselves today, which means when things are okay, when things are all fine, will determine how we deal when we are faced with crisis. What I meant to say is, a lot of time people say, okay, life is all good, I have no problem, so I don't need to study Bhagavad-Gita. No, you need to understand the message of Bhagavad-Gita to prepare yourself for the inevitable crisis. Is there anyone who can say that he would ever never face a crisis in his or her life? Crisis is for sure. Just like it is said in English, as sure as death, crisis is definitely for sure. So it's very important for us to study and understand the message of Bhagavad-Gita to prepare ourselves. So message of Bhagavad-Gita prepares us for that situation in our life. And like that, chapter 1 of Bhagavad-Gita ends. And with this, we conclude. Before we conclude, a quick trivia for all of you. We have another poll. So let's just to ask all of you. Do you feel Arjuna is right to retreat from battle out of compassion for his family members? Of course, I have not given any reasons right now. We'll discuss that more tomorrow, but we'll still discuss a little bit. What do you think about it? Based on whatever you've understood today, was Arjuna's decision right on the pretext of compassion? Yes, no, maybe, maybe not. What do you think about it? So that's the poll question. And the second question is, you can write it back to us or write it back to me. If you were in Arjuna's position, what would you do? I don't mean to say that you being a soldier fighting with Pakistan at the battlefield. That's not the meaning. Life is a battleground for us. When we are faced with such kind of a challenging situation, when our mind is saying, quit, walk away, what would you do? That's the point I'm asking you. Because it's very interesting what's going to happen tomorrow, what we're going to discuss tomorrow in our discussion, where in chapter 2, we're going to talk about the subject of inner awakening. What did Arjuna do next? Because we all know Arjuna fought. When Arjuna already decided to quit, how come he ended up fighting the war and winning the war? Is the subject matter of chapter 2, titled as Inner Awakening. We'll discuss more about this tomorrow. What is the response of our audience of the poll?
No, 54%, yes, 20%, not sure it was.
So what exactly was the question I put
Do you
it?
feel Arjuna is right to retreat from battle out of compassion for his family?
So do you feel right? Was Arjuna right to do so? No. So means they're saying wrong. That was wrong decision. Okay. So, okay, 54%. All right. So they've got the message. Thank you. With that, we conclude for today's session here. The slide deck and everything would be available on your course portal on the website, as well as there's a quiz for all of you to solve. After this session, you can go ahead and attempt the quiz that will help you understand how much you have understood about the subject matter, and also on the subject matter of crisis management that we tried to discuss today. Now, I'll request our host, if in case there are any questions, we can take some questions or any comments from our audience now. Hare Krishna. I guess we need to check for the volume, please.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Am I audible? Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Am I audible?
Yes, Shikha Prabhu, finally you're audible.
So, Prabhuji, thank you so much for this insightful session. Our first series is Doubt. We have few queries from Zoom and YouTube. So, we'll take Zoom first.
All right.
So there's Vivekji is asking, when Arjuna was with Krishna always, then why he was confused with those 5 dilemmas?
Oh, very interesting. Why was Arjuna confused although he was being with Krishna? There are different answers. First reason is because Lord Shri Krishna would himself speak in Bhagavad-Gita later on also. Krishna had, or you can say, had inspired Arjuna to get bewildered so that this wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita can be spoken, so that for all of us who would not have Krishna with them, would have the idea, would have the wisdom to understand how to make right decisions in their life. First thing. Second thing, to teach us a very important lesson of how when a person lacks spiritual awareness and spiritual knowledge, he can really not live a progressive life. He may grow rich, he may get possessions, he may get name, fame, but he ultimately can never be happy. So to teach some of those important and valuable lessons, Arjuna was put into the situation of bewilderment. And that is why Arjuna got bewildered. Now, why Acharyas explain like that? Because never ever there was a case before when Arjuna ever got bewildered. Just some time before this particular situation, Arjuna had single-handedly defeated the whole Kaurava army. At the end of the Agyatavas, when the Kauravas had attacked the kingdom of
Virat.
Virat, the kingdom of Virat, the name of Virat was the name of the king, his kingdom, then Arjuna as Brahmanala single-handedly had fought with Bhishma, Pitama, Dronacharya, Karna, Duryodhan, Shakuni and whatnot, and he had defeated all of them. And they all had to run away. So how can Arjuna get bewildered at this point of time? They were the same people standing there. Now there's few other additions happened. That's why he got affected. So that was the plan of the Lord. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. The other question from YouTube audience is Tarunji is asking why Dhritarashtra was so evil in spite of being son of Shri Vedvyas.
Dhritarashtra, why was he so evil despite being son of Vyasadeva? Just like we had Prahlad Maharaj, the saintly son of demon Hiranyakashipu. So I mean, it's interesting how sometimes we have strange progeny, you know. So what's the science behind it? What's the reason behind it? That's out of the context of our discussion right now. But that is what the Dhritarashtra was. But precisely, if you look at it, the Dhritarashtra was not always that bad. The problem that, or the I would say, the mistake that the Dhritarashtra did was almost similar like that of Arjuna right now. The Dhritarashtra did not accept his situation. What was the situation? He was born blind. Rather than accepting his situation that he is born blind, and he is born blind because of his own karmic reactions, is a result of his own past life actions that he have done. He rather blamed the destiny and he blamed the providence for that, saying that they have been unjust to me, and I would want to fulfill my desire of being a king. I, being the eldest son, have been deprived of my rightful, right on the king, on the the position of the king, not understanding from the right perspective or seeing from the spiritual vision. He took shelter of the material perspective, and he, rather than understanding that it is his own karma because of which he's put into the situation, he started finding, or he started blaming his destiny for that. He started blaming the providence. So when a person gets into this whole idea of victim mentality, I am a victim, I am a victim, the moment you say I'm a victim, which means you're blaming somebody else. If somebody says I'm a victim, the point is whatever goes on in an individual's life is all because of the reactions of our past activities. So the Dhritarashtra did not accept that. And that's how he became, he, kind of got deviated in the moral standards of the dharmic path. And he took the wrong things in his life, a shelter of the wrong things. And he got totally deviated from dharma, where he would use dharma to fulfill his agenda to remain a king. That's what happened with Dhritarashtra. If he would have accepted his destiny, Dhritarashtra was not bad. Dhritarashtra was a good person. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. One more interesting question coming from YouTube user. Rajiv ji is asking why we always love bad and evil, why we disregard good things.
Because that's easy to do in life. To give an example, the nature of this world is such that we are always pulled downwards. That's the reason we have a law of gravity. If you jump, you'll be dragged down, isn't it? To degrade is very easy because that's the law of this world. To elevate is challenging. Just like if you have to climb up the hill, does it take more effort or less effort as compared to walking down the hill? Simple. Climbing up takes more effort. Walking down takes more effort, less effort. Similarly, if you have to flow along with the stream of the river, is very easy. But if you have to swim against the flow of the river, which is very difficult. So the flow, or in other words, the nature of this world is very easy to get carried away with the bad things. Therefore, for accepting bad things in our life, nobody needs a teacher. People learn it by themselves. But to learn good things, we all need a teacher, isn't it?
Yeah. So can we take one more question?
Yeah, we can take.
Okay.
We
So
have time precisely until 8:30 for question answer. 8:30 we end. So our session schedule is 7 to 8 session and 8 to 8:30 question answers. And after 8 o'clock when session ends is up to the audience if they want to be online or not. But I would be there for half an hour after the session for question answers. Yes, Shikha Prabhu.
Okay, Prabhu. So there's one question from Zoom. Sneha Banerjee. She's asking, since Dhritarashtra was the main person to instigate Duryodhan to initiate the war, then why he wasn't punished?
Oh, who said he wasn't punished? He was severely punished. I mean, which father can, undergo the ordeal of losing all his sons? He went through a painful situation post-war. He lost all his 100 sons. And not only he lost all his 100 sons, he heard the vivid description of all how his 100 sons were killed. Bhima, how he tore open the chest of the Shasana, and how Bhima, kind of in one way cheated Duryodhan by hitting him on the thigh, and how Bhima collapsed on the Duryodhan collapsed on the ground, and finally, because Kauravas lost, and now all the Dhritarashtra didn't want to give up his kingship, had to give up his kingship, and he had to suffer. What could be a greater insult for a person of his stature to live in the house of his enemy now and being supported by the enemy who you always wanted to kill, isn't it? He became a dog in the house of Pandavas. And who was serving the Dhritarashtra? It was Bhima who would go and give the food to Dhritarashtra. And he will say every time, "Uncle, aa gaya main." And he will slap his biceps. And what was the indication of it? By these hands, I killed your 100 sons. And like that, every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for Dhritarashtra was going on. So tell me, was he suffering or not? What could be more suffering situation? Was a terrible suffering. All right.
Agreed. So one more question from Pooja ji, again from Zoom. She's asking how Arjuna able to choose Lord Krishna instead of Narayani Sena. How he developed this complete faith in Lord.
Well, you hear the message of Bhagavad-Gita, you'll be also able to choose Krishna. All right. As a matter of spiritual education. Faith develops from education. Education comes from hearing. So please go through these 18 days. You'll be also able to have faith as that of Arjuna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I think, yeah, that's it. We have all the questions. If we have still some questions, you can just drop us a note on WhatsApp, the Telegram.
If somebody wants to ask directly with Shikhar, they can be allowed to talk directly. Only thing is, if they want to ask directly, they request them to switch on the camera. I prefer that they speak when they switch on the camera.
Okay, sure. So if anyone has question, please switch on your camera. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Huh? He can manage that. Where is the question being asked? Shikhar, they're saying there's some question being asked on YouTube or Zoom.
Yeah, probably. Okay. So there's one question. Yashashri, many people blame to Draupadi for the war. What should be the correct answer to all of them?
Well, when it comes to causes, there's generally many causes. There's not only a single cause. Draupadi became an instrument. Certainly, she was an instrument. How she was an instrument? Because she was insulted. And for that insult, Lord Shri Krishna said, Kauravas have to be killed. So she became a medium of that. Somebody has to become a medium. But ultimately, she was not the cause. If Duryodhan and Dhritarashtra would have accepted the demands of Pandavas, even Krishna was willing to forgive Kauravas for the sin they had committed against Draupadi. So Draupadi was one of the instruments, or she was forcefully made an instrument. So blame cannot be given to Draupadi for that. It is not that Draupadi did Bhangra into the the Raj Mahal of Dhritarashtra, and then she got insulted. She was dragged out from her chamber. So how can we blame Draupadi for it? What did Draupadi do to be blamed for? Draupadi was made an instrument by the mistake of Duryodhan and both Yudhishthira Maharaj. It was Duryodhan and Shakuni who instigated Yudhishthira. You have still one more possession with you. If you put it on bat and if you win, you get everything back. And what is that one last possession? Is your wife Draupadi. Who reminded Yudhishthira? That was Shakuni and Duryodhan. And like that, Yudhishthira made a mistake of actually putting Draupadi on the stake and losing her finally. Hare Krishna. All right.
If we have any other questions, let us know. You can now unmute yourself.
So I guess we pause here for today. So thank you so much for joining. And tomorrow we'll meet again for the topic of inner awakening from chapter 2 of Bhagavad-Gita. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.